Welcome back to yet another episode of the Digital Adoption Show, where we host top L&D, HR, and tech luminaries and talk about what's next in the future of work at tech. In today's episode, as we embrace the women in L&D, we are here with a panel of experts sharing their experience and insights. In the first segment, we have Julie Savage-Fournier, process design and improvement consultant at Case and Radical, to speak about how can managers effectively become coaches to their employees, empowering them to develop problem-solving skills and address everyday challenges at work.
Two key elements is that each manager can become a coach of their employees. So each manager can actually make sure to develop their people. And the second point is to teach people how to solve problems because improvement is problem solving and there's no small problem. So if you can teach people to problem solve in a common way, a way that everyone understands, then you will fix the little everyday frictions that make work not really satisfying. But sometimes people just get stuck in the way they're working because they don't feel they have the permission to solve a problem. Their manager can be a coach for their problem solving thinking and can actually support their problem solving initiatives. And that's how you improve every day.
And then we have Giorgia Gamba, Global Talent and Learning Partner at Christian Aid, speaking about how can organizations define key skills, identify gaps, and pilot initiatives effectively. What steps ensure these pilots are scalable while adapting to the unique needs of different teams or departments?
In terms of steps, I think definition is key. So, what do we mean by skills in this organization, and how do we know if we have them or if we don't have them? How we define them, how we assess if we have them, and how we assess the gaps. So, I would also start from piloting and small trials. Think big, but start small. You want to have that big picture. You want to have that sort of direction of travel for the whole organization. But you want to probably start prioritize an area of an organization. It might be a department, it might be a team, it might be just a few people, depending on how you set up. But yeah, I would trial it and see how it works and what doesn't, and then use that to kind of not just expand the pilot to everybody else or the next department, the next team, but also adjust it as you go and have sort of an audit of this works really well and it's replicable across the organization and this worked really well, but it's also quite specific to maybe this team or this department and it can work for others, but it might need several adjustments or small adjustments, or it might need some changes. Particularly across very big organizations, sometimes you have subcultures. So you can see that something that works really well in an area might not work if exactly replicated. So you want to adjust it when you replicate it across other parts of the organization.
Then we have Emma Adderley, Recognition and Performance Manager at Lloyd Banking Groups, on what key questions should organizations ask themselves to embrace a culture of continuous learning and development. How can they assess leadership maturity, identify skill gaps, align with industry benchmarks, and leverage the right technology to support growth and adaptability?
I think there's 4 topics that I would actually cover with an organization that's wanting to shift into this space. And they can be quite blunt questions, but hopefully they're quite useful to ask yourself and be true around, do you value as a business continuous learning and development? So how mature is the business in this? And when I say L&D, I don't just mean your traditional training. I mean that continuous learning, that learning in the moment. Is the CEO behind that? Is everyone behind actually moving into this space where continuous learning is a part? The second one would be leadership maturity. This can be quite a big question to ask. Is your leadership in a space and mature enough to move into this space? And what I mean by this is, our leadership still in the position where they feel if a resource within their team was going to develop and get more skills and move into other areas of the business, would they help that to happen? Or would they be more concerned about the resource of the team and the present of what the work actually involves now? And that's a hard one because that's how we've been taught. A resource has been your resource. Actually, how do you open up that behavior and allow to give them opportunities to go across the business and build them skills. Do you know what skills that you need in your business and where the gaps are? So actually having that analysis of the skills that make up your business, then where are the gaps? And then how does this actually compare to industry as well? And do you have the technology to allow this to evolve as well? So do you have the right technology in place that can help you analyze them gaps, that can help them opportunities come up, and have that kind of one single source of truth around the skills that make up your business and the gap?
In the next segment, we have Rita Sukrit, a seasoned L&D leader with 2 decades of global experience, speaking on how can L&D professionals use AI as a tool to enhance their work while maintaining the depth and value of their expertise.
When you think about it, when companies are hit hard times and they have to cut back, we are the first to go. And in my career, because I've been working about 25 years, I've been downsized 5 times, which is why I don't look at a job when it's full time or contract. But here's my AI concern, right? We are not very good at adopting it as an industry or learning and development. And I really believe we should start using it, even if it's just to be curious about it, find out what it can do or not. And likely, more than likely, a lot of organizations have a lot of tools or have what tools of AI. We just need to go out there and find out what's out there and can we use it and can we apply it in our L&D role. But the second concern, and last week we had this conversation and I want to share it with you today. We had the concern is learning and development is not just instructional design. It's not just facilitation. It's not just these. It's the whole 5 areas we talked about earlier. And if you don't understand the depth and the breadth of L&D, or if you don't know adult learning principles or design methodologies or evaluation models, I could go on because all these are part of L&D. It's not going to serve you with AI because when you prompt engineer something into AI and it comes back to you, you have to be able to critique it, analyze it, and make sure that aligns with learning and development as a vocation. Now, businesses are probably going to say, because if we can't do this, we can't course correct it, businesses are going to come back and say, why do I need L&D if AI can do this? It's gaining efficiency in content development, just about everything you're doing. And this is where we need to flip the card and let them know that it's a tool to be used in conjunction, but we are the mastermind of L&D, not AI. And it's not there yet. There's some lessons we discussed last week, and I'm going to share that with you. It's just 3. Don't worry. So the first, when you're using AI, you want to start with a real life problem. What exactly are we trying to solve? Is it retention of employees or productivity? What exactly do we want to solve? And use that as a starting point. The second thing is know what good learning looks like. You have to understand all the methodologies because we don't design learning because it's a nice thing to do. We design it with structure, with methods, with models, with all of that metric, everything there. So know what good learning looks like and know how to people learn and how they are engaged and keep that going. And the third aspect is use it for augmentation, not for automation, because it's not here to replace us. It's good for tasks, but it's not good for job. And the two really need to work together for it to work. With that, you need some people in L&D to understand AI or to start understanding it and maximizing it in the role.
Next, we have Dr. Alaina Slata, a distinguished learning architect and expert in the field of educational design and evaluation, talks about how can organizations ensure they have the right data and tools to make informed, evidence-based decisions.
In the process of becoming data driven, I would be doing a self assessment and I would ask myself, do I have the data I need to make important decisions? Or the reverse. When I make important decisions, how do I make those decisions? And do I look to data or what do I do? And if people don't feel like data that they have access to is overly useful in the important decisions they're making, and that can be anything from how do I prioritize the initiatives that I'm working on in this organization? It could be how do I improve the program that we just completed? Or it could be how do we figure out what initiative is necessary to solve a problem? Whatever it is that you're doing in terms of making big decisions, we need evidence and data that helps us make sure we're making the right choices in what we invest in. If you're like, I don't really feel like my data is overly useful when I make these kinds of decisions, then you don't have the right data or the right systems, or the data is not accessible. And so, based upon your honest answer to the question, when I make important decisions, like, where do I go? What do I turn to? Do I just talk to my supervisor? Or can I go to a certain dashboard or technology tool and make some queries to help me get some insights to make decisions maybe before I talk to my supervisor? So, if your data is convoluted and not useful, it's likely that you are not on the data driven side of the spectrum. And it's time to get really clear on what data would be useful and start building the systems just incrementally to get
Yeah.
access to that data or to create the data in the first place to then make those decisions. But ultimately, it's that decision making ability with data that helps us to understand if we're moving in the right direction to be data driven
Yeah.
or not.
Then we have Zain Bozad, Director of Research at the Learning Guild, with over 2 decades of experience in learning and development, shares how can organizations scale a community by defining its purpose, targeting the right audience, and avoiding vanity metrics while maintaining engagement.
First thing I want to say is, what are you scaling and why, and how big do you envision this? Because I think we run into trouble thinking everybody in the world needs to belong to our community. I think sure, marketing would love that because they're selling product, right? I don't know that an L&D community needs the whole world in it. So I think my first thing is, when you're trying to get started, people want everything for everyone in their community, and I don't think that's realistic. And we're going to, you have a question coming up that I can address that better, I think. So I think, first of all, what is it you're trying to do? Why do you want this community? Who is in this community? Are you wanting specifically, if you're selling a software like an authoring tool, do you want people who have already bought it? Do you want to have to contend with people you're trying to sell to? Do you want just brand new users to get them started the first 6 months? Do you want experience? And you need to think about what you're doing, because I think community is a very nice, warm, fuzzy word, and we don't specify it very well. We get into trouble with vanity metrics, with saying, oh, we have 8,000 members, we have 27,000 members, and you may see that, yeah, and 40 of them are active. So to give some thought to that. But I think when you're trying to scale it, maybe think about what I just said. Do you need pocket or spaces or something that differentiates the different kinds of users you have? You know, I would call myself a power user of PowerPoint up to the last 6 years or so. I haven't, those scales have kind of declined on me because I don't need them as much. I don't need 75 people again asking every day, how do I get started and what is the ribbon for, right? I'm going to be bored with that. And I'm going to get tired of always having to scroll through those conversations to find things useful for me. So you might need an intermediate group, or I might want to be in a more advanced group. That doesn't mean it needs to be a different community somewhere else. It just means maybe you need to differentiate it. I would look at, so who is it for? What are you trying to do? You know, one of the challenges we have, and I don't mean to be tangling up with other questions, but, you know, if you're working with people who've already bought the product, they don't need you to be selling the product, right? They're looking for something else from that, more use of it, how to expand it. Maybe you've got add-ons, maybe there's more skills they could build. So when you're trying to scale it, I would also look for where you can get some new blood from time to time. I run into this with some face-to-face groups I belong to, where we just all kind of get bored with each other. How can we bring in some new people? What would appeal to them? Should we have people invite a friend? Should we have, you know, some guest speakers? My husband's in a situation right now with a community where they're all scrambling to learn about their health insurance. And they're all talking to each other and no one knows anything. And so they really need to find somebody to come and speak from outside that community to in, right? Am I making sense? And that would attract some new members. So I think there's a number of ways to scale it and things you could do to build it out. But I also would invite people to be judicious about that. You know, the fact that you have 10,000 members doesn't make it a great community. The fact that a YouTube video has 10,000 views doesn't mean it's a great video. It might be the oldest video. It might be the one that had advertising dollars behind it, right? So, you know, look and see what you're really trying to do, and then target the scaling in a way that makes sense.
In the segment, we have Dr. Hannah Gore and Teresa Rose. Dr. Gore has 25 years of experience in L&D, HR, and recruitment, having led global initiatives and developed content for millions of learners. Dr. Gore speaks about how can L&D professionals align training initiatives with industry needs and company goals to address skill gaps.
There's a lot of L&D people out there who are absolutely fantastic at L&D, and they can answer any pop quiz on L&D technologies that are available in learning, different ways of designing, etc. They're absolutely fantastic. But if you give them a pop quiz about the industry that their company that they work for is in, they may not do as well. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of what Teresa was saying about understanding the data of the customers, understanding the industry that they are in. It is not just about, as Teresa was saying, these are the top 10 skills that LinkedIn say that we need. Okay, great. But what industry am I in? That top 10 could be a completely different order based on the industry that I'm in. So I've worked with clients before that are in, the accountants industry, the banking industry. These have different needs, different skills, and you've really got to understand your company, the industry that it's in, its 5-year goals, to really understand the difference between the upskilling and reskilling. So with the upskilling, it's about obviously refining the skill set that you already have, potentially getting some new skills, but on your existing role and responsibility. And that role and responsibility may evolve slightly over the years, as the technology enhances, as it upgrades. Now that's still upskilling, but reskilling is brand new technology, brand new ways of working. So for example, the advent of AI, that's a reskill. Absolutely. That's not an upskill. It wasn't there a couple of years ago. If you're using SAP and SAP comes out with a new upgrade, that's an upskill.
Yeah.
And so if they bring out a brand new AI platform, that's a reskill. So I think a lot of companies need to understand the difference between the two, because they use the term intermittently and they can two completely different things. So I think that's super important. It's also important to understand where the position is inside the industry, understand where your CEO wants your company to be. So that is really important, because you've got to upskill your people now and reskill them for the future. Yeah. So if your CEO wants you to be in a position in a certain market share in 5 years' time, then you've got to look at a skills gap analysis for all employees. And so it's something that we do at QS. We look at the skills that our people have. It's something I did in Solera. So it's the skills that all the employees in Solera had, all 7,000 of them. And it's all skills I'm looking at, not just the skills for the roles, because I need to know where to position them in the future. So if they've got hidden skills, I need to know to unlock them in the future and work out, where does the CEO want to be? And then work out where that gap is. So that gap is going to move continually thanks to the rapid pace of technology. And they've got to understand, where do those training initiatives slot into those gaps? Where are the priorities? So where is the top 10? In what order is that top 10? And it's really understanding the business objectives of your organization to get to the heart of that, and then create those learning opportunities based on those needs. And it's not a case of one size fits all. So what you see at a conference that worked for such and such may not work for you. But it's finding that happy mix of like an ecosystem of different things that are going to work for different types of skills or different types of environments. So say, for example, my CEO, she would want to have us, AI experts within X number of years. I have to start that today to make sure that they're experts by the time that we get to that goal. Yeah. So it's understanding that these 5-year plans that these CEOs have, you have to start today to get them to pivot, to move that ship, to get them there. And then, most importantly, continually evaluate that data, because things move, things change. As we've seen with the birth of AI, how rapidly that organization shift has happened inside so many organizations, that you have to constantly reassess what's happening in the future. And it's not just how our industry works, it's how our clients work inside that industry. And you have to keep moving. So really, the upskill, reskill, it is an everyday piece. Every single year, you're going to have to be reworking that. It's not here's my 5-year plan, see you in 5 years. This is, as Teresa was saying with the data, is a continual piece.
Then we have Tessa Rose with 15 years of experience, has a rich background in organizational and people development, including roles in sales, HR, and digital transformation. And Rose speaks about what data and insights can help you determine the need for reskilling and upskilling, and how can you test whether the identified problem is the actual issue.
Data, that's the first thing that comes to my mind around this, is what data and insights have you got that tell you that there is either a reskilling or an upskilling need? And with that data, are you also testing or disproving that hypothesis? Because you might think that there's a certain problem, but is it the real problem that you think you have? Is it just purely the presenting problem? A bit like going to the doctor. You might have a problem or a symptom and the doctor treats it, but it's not the underlying problem. And it's very similar when you're presented with reskilling and upskilling, and the differences between those and what your strategy and approach might be. I've been talking a lot about skills segmentation and thinking about the BCG matrix, if you're aware of that. So what skills are deriving the most value for you? What are the disruptive skills, the problem child? What skills are you finding a causing failure demand in your organization to your customers? What data have you got about your customers as well, and what they need and want? So it's about gathering that data initially and looking at that data to derive insights. So you can have as much data as you want, but if you're not gathering the insights and then making the decisions and taking the actions, you're not going to get anywhere. And you will be, and it's not about opinions either, though they might come into it a little bit in terms of, I've got an opinion that we need to do this. What's the data and the insights telling you? And if you've got gaps, then gather more data and do that fact finding before you start to make investments in learning programs that might be on future skills or things like that, because somebody thinks it's a good idea to do it because there's a report from the World Economic Forum that says we should be doing these top 10 future skills, but they don't have any relevance to your organization, they don't give a purpose to your people, and they don't serve customers and generate value and income. So that is my long short answer on that.
Lastly, Sally Loftus, a distinguished human resource consultant specializing in organizational development and social justice, shares insights on how can organizations nurture and monitor their culture using Edgar Schein's framework of artifacts, espoused values, and underlying assumptions.
Let me kind of, when we talk about organizational culture, I typically use Edgar Schein's definition, which is around kind of artifacts, underlying assumptions, and espousing values. So artifacts being like, what can you see and hear, and experience with your five senses? So if I walk into your office space, what am I going to learn about the organization from that, right? Or if I observe a team working together, what am I going to learn by being in person with that group or in a hybrid meeting? Espoused values are typically whatever the core values are of the organization or basic behaviors. What do we say, who we are, and how we act and how we show up to work? I work with a lot of organizations right now on updating that, because typically those are laid out more often as like a set of core values, but like in the employee handbook, it's typically like code of conduct. Here are all the things you could do to get fired. So typically I'm working with clients to, if we're working on handbooks, updating with like things like how we show up. Like these are the positive behaviors. This is what this looks like, not just the negative behaviors. And so making sure that aligns with what those values are. And then kind of the underlying assumptions are really the things that are, not said, but that happen. Like, you work for what fix when this happens, right? Or, this is a organization meeting when this happens. So really, that's the deeper work in the culture. And that's the stuff that's happening between people and on teams and between teams. And that's why building connection and trust is so important, because to your point earlier around dissent, and conflict, is like you're able to call out and be like, this is what we say, but this is not what we're doing. And it's not a huge personal thing, right? So culture is built of those, and it's not just something you build and let go. Culture is continuously something you're monitoring, you're building. It's changing because the people who work there are changing in and out, and also how the organization evolves over time is changing. So it's very much a living organism that needs to be nurtured.
As we wrap up today's conversation, thank you to our guests for sharing their insights, and thank you to our listeners for joining us on the Digital Adoption Show. We encourage you to also explore similar insightful episodes on the Digital Adoption Show, available across all the major platforms Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. I'm your host, Ankit Kumar Singh, signing off. Stay tuned for more engaging and interesting episodes in the future.